a producer or sponsor, and not those of Medford Community Cablevision, its staff, management, board of directors, or other affiliates.
Welcome to the latest edition of Real Grass, Real Heroes, a look at the golden age of sports in Boston. I'm your host, Jim Tuberosa, and before I formally introduce my special guest tonight, I want to give you a little 5-minute clip on his life story.
Prior to his government service, State Auditor Joe DeNucci was a well-known pro boxer. He holds the distinction of having the most fights and most wins in the history of the Boston Garden. From the boxing ring to the political ring, DeNucci has always been a contender.
I was a young kid, and my father was the maintenance man at the Newton YMCA. He also taught boxing. I used to watch him give boxing lessons, and, you know, in those days, there were really two sports. On the street corner, you wanted to be a professional ball player playing baseball with the Yankees or the Red Sox, or you wanted to be heavyweight champion of the world or the middleweight champion of the world. Never once did I dream of running for public office in those days. I only had one dream, and that was to be the champion of the world, middleweight champion of the world. Boxing is much easier than politics. In boxing, at least you know who your opponents are or who your opponent is. In this business, this is more dangerous. It really is. The greatest promoter, in my opinion, of all time was Sam Silverman. He'd, on a shoestring, he'd bring the greatest fighters in the world. He'd take chances. He was a gambler. My manager, Rip Valenti, played a big role in my success, my exposure. My first professional fight in the Boston Garden, I remember the Newton High School band being there. I remember looking out at the crowd and seeing black and orange, which was the Newton High School colors. They were the Newton High School colors. I remember seeing that. And I wish it was a better fight. I hit him one punch and he went. I won the Golden Gloves up in Lowell. Then I turned pro while I was still in high school. I was a senior at Newton High, and I turned professional. I think if I have one regret, and please don't think it sounds like I'm boasting, but I think I had too much ability too soon, too much too soon, and I was pushed along very quickly, and that put a lot of pressure on me. I fought main bouts after, I think I was 18 years old. I was fighting guys like Tiger Jones and Chico Villar and some of the best fighters in the world. And I think it is important for athletes, and whether you're a fighter, a football player, a soccer player, if you have any kind of a reputation, even if you don't, you got to give something back to your community. And I think with that comes responsibility. Responsibility to show kids that you have to work hard, you have to earn your way in life, that working hard is the only way to win. I was only knocked down once in my career, and it was Florentino Fernandez at the Boston Arena. It was on national television. I was out of shape before the fight. I took the fight in short notice. I took off, if you can believe this, I had to take off about 30 pounds to make the weight. I did that in about 3.5 weeks. I was dehydrated. I got knocked out. I regret that night. I'm ashamed of that night. Other than that, most of my memories, and it's funny that you remember the hurt, the fights you should have won, they robbed me. When I boxed Emil Griffith at the Heinz Auditorium, my comeback in 1972, I beat Emil Griffith, middleweight champion of the world. I didn't grow up as a kid wanting to be, as I said earlier, a politician. It just happened. It happened. I do it well. I care about what I do. I care about people. I come up the hard way. I had another life. This isn't my whole life. My family's the most important thing in the world to me. And this is where they are. So they couldn't pay me enough money to leave my roots. This area, Boston, Newton, it's my life. And I don't need too much real estate.
And that only begins to tell you the story of my guest, probably one of the most important men in Massachusetts history in the second half of the 20th century. You folks out there know him as the Honorable A. Joseph DeNucci, the longest serving state auditor in Massachusetts history. But people from my generation know him as the uncrowned middleweight champion of the world, Joseph DeNucci. Big Joe DeNucci. Welcome to the show, Joe. Thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure to be here.
Joe, you know, there's so many things here. I'm looking through your record. I'm looking through all the fights that you had and everything else. How did you get into boxing in the first place? I know the story, but maybe our fans don't.
Well, my father was a janitor of the Newton YMCA, and he did some boxing. And when he was in the Army, he was a champion, you know, in boxing. And he used to give boxing lessons at the Newton YMCA, and I was a kid, and I used to watch him give boxing lessons. And, you know, so one time I ended up boxing with one of the kids that he was teaching, and I went after him a little bit. My father got so mad, and he put on gloves, and he boxed me with them. And but anyway, that's how it really started. You know, he was a great guy and a good man. Never wanted me to be a fighter though, but I had to be.
Gotcha, absolutely, and thank God you did. In the 50s, Tony DeMarco kept boxing alive in Boston, and after Tony left, you were the only guy to keep boxing alive for about 15 years. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the year was 1958. You were, I think you were still 17 years old, maybe 18,
57.
and you're fighting main events in Boston Garden, and your manager, Rip Valenti, who you're going to tell us about, and Sam Silverman put together a fight, the fights that were bringing in some of the biggest names in boxing in the country. Yeah. And how did you feel being a young kid and fighting these fights? It was like...
Well, my idol was Tony DeMarco. He was my idol. And my father took me into the garden and to watch Tony beat, you know, the championship of the world. He won the champion, and I was there. And it, you know, so then I ended up with Rip Valenti, Sammy Fuller.
Good, good old Sammy Fuller.
Know, and I guess they're probably the reason why I had the most fights in the history of the Boston Garden and the most wins in the Boston Garden. And, you know, I never won the championship of the world, but, you know, I had a lot of fights in the Garden, and it was because of Rip Valenti. And I used to go to his house, and it's here in Medford.
Yeah.
You know, every Christmas Eve, used to go to his house.
He was something special.
Him and his family. And those were the days of Medford.
Yeah. You mentioned Tony. Let me see if we can show this picture. on this one here. See if you can bring that in. This is a picture of Joe with Tony, and I think it's 1956 or 57. But, okay, there you go. That'll do it. But at any rate, you must love that picture, Joe.
Yeah, well,
That's a great one. You know, you mentioned Sammy Fuller. Now, I knew Johnny Gagliardi very well, who was a stablemate of yours, you know, and met Sammy Fuller. Sammy Fuller was probably one of the greatest trainers around.
oh yeah, he was good, really good. But I had some good training before Sammy. You know, I had Louis Berrazzano and my father down at the Newton YMCA, and Lucci he won the you know, the featherweight championship, the NAAA, you know, NAA. Anyway, him and my father started me off. But when I ended up with Rip and Sammy Fuller, that's when I started boxing. You know, as a pro.
Yeah.
And I had to change my name because I was not change my name, but I had to get a different certificate.
You had to be a year older somehow or other.
Yeah, because I was 17. You had to be 18 to get a license to, you know, box.
You know, I'm going to
as
jump.
a pro.
I got you. I'm going to jump ahead of myself. I wanted to ask you about a lot of the fighters that you had coming up. But at 18 years old, you pretty much kept Boston. That was the beginning of keeping boxing alive and big in Boston, because Sam Silverman was bringing in some of the big names like Chico Vijar and more, Tiger Jones, Joey Jardello, all these guys. But at 18 years old, how did you feel about getting thrown into the breach? You were probably, and I think you made a mention it too, but a lot of other people have said it years ago.
Well, I was 17.
Joe was too good, too early.
I was a pro. I was still in high school.
Yeah.
And I was fighting, you know, as a professional fighter. And but we had to change the birth certificate from 1939 to 1938, and that's how I got to be the.
And Tony DeMarco can tell you all about that.
No, he was great. Tony was great, you know, and all the fights that you're talking about that I had and kept it going and all that. It's Rip Valenti, Sam Silverman, and the people who gave me those fights, brought those people in for me to box, and you know, and they were all here from Medford here.
Yeah,
Rip.
I always felt that Sam Silverman, what Subway Sam they called him, and some of the sports writers even made fun of him, but poor Sam, he worked his tail off, bringing fights. A lot of the fighters, I mean, a lot of the newspapers would not really give him a lot of publicity, but Sam just kept on going and going. I'd love to see somebody write a book about Sam. I mentioned to Johnny Gagliardi, he said, no, he said, Sam was too good for everybody. That we want to keep him privately ourselves. And I understand why he feels that way, but your feelings about Sam Silverman and what went on in those days.
He's a great guy, you know, and boxing was everything to him. It was it, everything. And we got to be my last fight in Lyon, France. He was with me in Lyon, France.
Yeah.
And he loved boxing, and he really did. And quite a guy. And I can remember he came to when I got married in June of 1962. He was at the church and he gave me the biggest number that I got.
I can believe it. I can believe it.
A finish, I think.
But yeah, I can believe it. You know,
he was a great guy.
Yeah, and Rip Valenti.
Oh, Rip was Rip. He was the best too. That was a great, both of them.
A great era.
1 and 1A.
Absolutely.
Unbelievable.
But
and that's one of the reasons why I got to be where I was as a fighter. You know,
sure.
They gave me the fights.
Now Johnny Buckley goes way back to he managed Jack Shockey.
Yeah.
And Paul Pender.
Yeah.
But anything you can add about Johnny Buckley, you know, what he meant to boxing in Boston?
Oh, he was a great manager and promoter. He was a good man. He was downstairs from the gym.
Mm-hmm.
Second floor is John Buckley.
Yeah.
He would be upstairs.
Sure. You know, speaking of the New Garden Gym you're talking about,
Yeah.
right, on Friend Street, I did an interview with Al Clementi. God, it had to be 25 years ago. And in the course, because Al Clementi's been around since when, around 1911,
Yep.
you know, in boxing. And he was around in the Jack Johnson era.
It was something.
And so one of the questions I asked him was, you know, I said, Al, I says, I know we see a lot of guys out there that are real tough guys in the ring when they're in the garden fighting, but everybody really believes, I believe it, that the real tough guys, you see them fighting in the gym. Who would you say is probably the best gym fighter, you know, tough guys in the gym? He said, Joe DeNucci and Johnny Gagliardi, right off the top.
Yeah, Johnny Gag.
You know?
I'll tell you, John, he knew how to box. And it's kind of sad that he didn't get to where he should have been as a fighter.
Kept breaking his hand.
Yeah, well, that, and, you know, a couple of times fights didn't come through and things like that.
Yeah.
But Johnny Gagliardi was somebody. And when I think of Medford, I think of Johnny Gagliardi. Quite a guy.
Yeah, I remember seeing him spar when Paul Pender was preparing for his, I think it was his first fight with Robinson.
Remember Robinson.
And he sparred with Robinson. Robinson said, kid looks like me. You know?
Yeah.
At that time, by the way, I said to Robinson, there were a bunch of us that he was talking to. You know what a great guy
Yeah, he was.
Sugar Ray was. And I said, you know, I said, you've got such great knockout power. I would have thought you would have been a lot bigger. He said, well, actually, I don't have knockout power. He says, I've got knockout timing. You know, and he gave us a couple of examples of how, right from the beginning, he'll make moves and see what the other guy does, and then eventually make him walk into it.
He was somebody.
A lot of people think, now I'm assuming you saw both of those fights, both the Robinson-Pender fights.
Yes, I did.
A lot of people think that the first fight, Robinson got robbed.
I don't think so.
And no, I don't think so either. But I was wondering why so many people thought that. And then he was willing to come back to Boston, you know, for the second fight.
Paul Pender was a good boxer.
I guess he was,
boxer.
yeah.
You know, and I think, you know, he lived in Brookline, and I lived in Newton. And Newton and Brookline,
Yeah,
they had
rivals.
They played every game on, you know, Thanksgiving. You know,
Yeah.
Newton and Brookline. So me and Paul, he was Brookline, I was Newton, and we never had that fight. But he was a good fighter and a good guy. And when I became a state representative and everything, he was always around.
Yeah, and a lot of people wondered why in the world did the two of you never get to fight. I remember very well there were two different fights that one of them with Tiger Jones, the other one with Joey Giardello, that you were promised a title fight if you won the fight. And both of them in Boston, as far as I'm concerned, you won them, but they called them a draw.
Well,
You know, and
you know, I didn't lose
no, I know.
hardly any fights.
Whatever happened to
And, you know, it just, you know, it was awful.
Boston decision? And to your credit, you never beefed. And a lot of people through the years have said Joe would never beef about anything. He just never said a word, walked on his merry way. But you really must have been, you know, burning at those things.
Well, I didn't go public with it, but
Well, I understand.
my poor wife heard it.
I know, poor Barbara.
Barbara, yeah.
But,
Really?
Going along, you fought some of the real tough guys. I remember Eddie Connors. As a matter of fact, Eddie Connors was your first 10-rounder, wasn't it?
Well, one of the first, yeah.
One of the first
He
10-rounders?
was a good fighter.
Yeah,
He was a good
one of the Savin Hill gang.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, we fought, I don't know if we fought twice or 3 times. I fought him anyway. I remember the first time I fought him, you know, I won the fight, but, you know, He was a pretty good fighter.
Oh, yeah.
He was a good fighter.
Tough kid. I always got him mixed up with Jimmy Connors. As a matter of fact, weren't there two Jimmy Connors, one of them from Sharon and the other one from, I forget where else. But that was truly the golden age of boxing.
But we used to stay in touch with each other.
Really?
You know, after, where are you?
It's so funny. A lot of people who are not really boxing fans or something, they say, these two guys get in the ring and they kill each other. How can they possibly be friends? They just don't understand, the camaraderie that you get from a real warrior. That's
right.
the best way to describe you as a warrior.
Well, you have a tough fight. The tougher the fight, the more you hug after the fight.
Sure,
And that's
absolutely,
the truth.
absolutely.
It's kind of crazy, but that's the way it is.
Yeah. The Emil Griffith, my God, I shouldn't even bring it up, but that's another one that you got robbed in.
Yeah.
I was at the fight.
What are you gonna do?
One of them, I know you fought him twice.
In 3 weeks.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about how did that happen in only 3 weeks?
In 3 weeks. Well, that's what I had to do. And, I got robbed both of them.
Yeah.
It was,
Some unbelievable fights. But the Tiger Jones fight, as a matter of fact, that come out a draw, and you beaten him.
I beat him the next time.
Yeah. But he even said...
He was a good fighter.
After that fight, he said he shook his head and he said, wow, he said, what a gift that was. He says, this guy definitely deserves a rematch.
Yeah, he was all right.
But yeah, he was something else. And Joey Giardello, another one. And then he went on to win.
He won the title after my fight.
Yeah.
I fought him in, I think, December of 61.
Mm-hmm.
And he won the title the next year.
You got a good memory.
Yeah.
But, what was I going to... I wanted to ask you about some of the early fights. Jackson Brown. It seemed like you fought him a million times and you beat him every time. And wasn't Sergeant Jackson Brown?
Yeah.
Didn't he win a national amateur title?
Yes, he did. He won the welterweight championship as an amateur.
Yeah.
He was the world amateur champion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was only a welterweight then. Yeah.
Probably. But there were a few. I got a list over here. Let me use my crib sheet over here, and with the Jackson Brown and Lee Williams is the other name that I wanted to think of. But Lee Williams, and of course, we got to talk about Iron Mike Pusateri.
Oh, Jesus.
I know Mike. I know he's one of your best friends.
Yeah.
But
Good kid.
That's probably how you became friends. The wars.
Nah, but I think I've been 2 fights in a row.
Yeah.
Good kid.
And both of them were real wars.
Were they?
Yeah.
As long as I won.
No, both of them were real wars.
Yeah, he's a good
kid.
Well, he was a light heavyweight,
Is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that he was that, because right now I think he's probably only about 60 pounds.
Really?
I think he's 160 pounds. I haven't seen him in about a year. But
he's a good guy. I had his, later on when I was the auditor, I had his son working for me.
Is that right?
Yeah. You get in trouble to do that now. It's, it's like a crime, for Christ's sake.
Well, gee whiz.
You can't help people anymore.
Barney Frank, didn't he have his boyfriend working for Freddie Mac or something like that? And
Barney's a good guy. He was my friend. He sat next to me in the House of Representatives when we were both there. And when I ran for state auditor, statewide, he put my name in action
he made the nomination
at the convention.
Yeah.
Every time I ran, and he was always there for me, always there, and a good guy. And I reading that today was, why?
I know.
Why?
I know why they bring it up, but getting back to boxing, I wanted to ask you about the influence that Tony may have had on you. After
he was it. He was my idol. He was, and I had to be. They said I used to look like him a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, and you know that was great. You know, and he had a lot to do with my wanting to be there. I wanted to get there, and I used to go to his, you know, whether it be the mountains down in New Hampshire when he trained for his fights, and I was there with him, and I was lucky. That's why he was with Rip, and Rip put me there, and so a lot of good things happened to me through Rip and Sam Silverman, and yeah.
They're all great
My
people.
mother, my father.
Yeah, everybody was great people.
Yeah, good people.
You know, I think we're ready. Do we have somebody out there that wanted to come in and meet Joe? Hello? Dan, can you hear me?
Yes, Jim, we have a special guest.
Who?
And, we just heard that he's getting all prepared in the green room.
Okay, well,
Whenever you're ready, we can
you don't mind having somebody else sit in with us, do you?
No. Who is it?
Okay, let's see what's behind door number 1.
behind door number 1. We'll see if we can get Ariana to get our special guest in the studio.
Is Johnny Guy?
No. You'll enjoy it. Wait a minute, is somebody back there putting makeup on or something? If you are, we'll make fun of you forever.
Yeah, he's getting his hair done. Hairspray in that hair.
Put hairspray? Wait a minute. Nobody in boxing uses hairspray. You know, just like Tom Hanks said, there's no crying in baseball. There's no hairspray in boxing.
I think the guest, I think he went to the wrong room.
He went into the wrong room.
Yeah.
No, we have to hunt him up.
Yeah.
Remember I told you you'll enjoy the show.
Oh yeah, it was, yeah.
Well,
His poor wife, she's chasing him all over the place.
no kidding. Well,
See who we have. Well, I guess guys keep on talking while we're trying to get our guest back in the studio. He walked out. Front door.
come on in.
Oh, gee. Get over here. How are ya?
Ladies and gentlemen,
Oh, I love that.
Tony DeMarco.
Tony DeMarco. Oh
Tony.
my God,
We did it.
this is great.
Welcome.
You are the champ. You are the champ.
And my wife was here too.
Is she?
I love
Let's
that.
bring her
This
in.
was a carefully guarded secret.
Oh,
This is a kid. I knew it would make for a great
waited
show.
for
I knew you'd enjoy it.
come here.
There's a chair. Ariana, is that the chair? And okay, we're all set with the mic.
¿Cómo se siente?
Yeah,
Send
it's
them
good.
off.
Yeah,
All right.
it was good. You look good.
You folks are looking.
I just said how I was just saying how much I. Tony,
when boxing.
how many times did I
was-
say he was my?
I
idol?
know that, and I already knew it. That's why I made these plans 3 weeks ago,
Oh,
and we made it a carefully guarded secret. Didn't tell anybody, except I told your wife,
figured that Tony was going to be here.
and she kept the secret because she knew
She never told
you'd be
me.
She knew you'd be happy with this. And secrets like that are great,
The best.
and
And I just said how I used to go to, you know. When
I
you
just
were
asked him.
training.
Are we on yet? You been on?
Yeah.
we're on.
You're on right now.
But
No.
they're just watching our roundtable discussion of just fooling around.
Are we ready?
We're on. Oh yeah, we've been ready. We've been on all along. We've been going on all along.
I don't think so.
But if anybody didn't hear me, okay, he's on camera now. So nope. Okay. For anybody who missed it, the former undisputed world welterweight champion, the pride of the North End, Tony DeMarco.
The best.
And again, all you folks out there that you newcomers to boxing in sports in Boston, back in from the late 40s with Tony all the way up to 70, God, you're talking about a number of years, boxing was king in Boston due to these two gentlemen on my right. And I'm going to try and turn the show over to them and just, we talked about Rip Valenti a little bit.
Oh, we did.
But yeah, I mean, Joe, but you two guys got to have some nice private memories of Rip, Sam Silverman, Sammy Fuller.
Well, you know, these are good names, and you mentioned some good names. You know, Rip Valenti. He's a guy. He promoted fights. He managed fights. He did a lot of. He's always in the boxing game since he was a young fella.
That's right.
And he knew everybody. He knew everybody, and you know, everybody from all angles. And he was, he had the foresight of promoting fighters like Joe and I and others. Tommy Collins is an example.
Right.
That's another name I want to bring up.
Real big with him. As a matter of fact, Tommy Collins grew up in his home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he was very exceptional. But I'm not here to speak about myself as much as I want to speak about Joe.
And talk about your experiences.
He is my idol.
Hey.
He tells everyone that I'm his idol. And in reality, he did more for me than I ever could do for him.
You both deserve it.
Just being you is what you did for me, because that's very important to me.
But Joe is not only a great fighter. He fought all the contenders. I've seen him fight. Like Joey Gidello. Remember Joey Gidello?
Yeah.
You beat Joey Gidello. I mean, let's face it.
Yeah.
The draw
They
was
called it
not
a draw, yeah.
sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
And Jackson, remember Jackson Brown?
Jackson Brown.
Yeah.
I beat him 3 times.
And Cochran.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, these guys they were coming up.
Yeah.
Of course, Joey Gidello was champion of the world. And a great guy too.
After he fought me, he became the champion.
Yeah.
Tiger Jones.
It was either he or Joe.
Yeah.
And they were both up there.
Yeah.
And they fought to a draw, which I thought everyone else did too. Thought that Joe won the fight.
Mm-hmm.
But he got the break and he fought. He fought for the middleweight champion and won.
Sure. Very few people realize Boston Garden was originally built for boxing, was it not?
Yes.
It was
Originally,
built.
I think Honey Boy Finnegan
Right.
was the first fight,
Yep.
from my recollection.
Yep. I started to say Honey Melody, but I think you're right, Tony.
Not Honey Melody, no. Honey Finnegan,
Yeah.
Honey Boy Finnegan.
But after Jack Sharkey, and I don't know how many fights Jack Sharkey actually fought in Boston. I know Rocky Marciano didn't fight in Boston.
Never.
And even Joe Louis. That was an old trivia question. Who fought more fights in Boston, Rocky Marciano or Joe Louis?
Well,
Joe
I got
did.
news for you. No, Joe Louis.
Yeah.
You know who had more fights than anyone else in the Boston Garden?
Joe,
That's true.
I know.
Joe DeNucci. I had more main events.
Yeah.
That's right. That's
But
why.
he was coming up with the 4 rounders, 6 rounders, 8 rounders, and
Yeah.
another 8 rounders, and then
All his fights.
the top
That's right.
fights,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
the 10-round fights that he had with all the contenders. He had more fights, but I was up there too because I.
You wanna know
main
something?
events.
I fought every fight that you had.
Absolutely.
Joe was on the undercard.
I was the undercard.
And if it wasn't for Tony, then Joe wouldn't have had a card to be on.
That's right.
But I'm saying
No.
the two of you meant so
They
much to
mistake
Boston
us.
boxing.
They mistaked us for each other, and that was okay. But I wouldn't mind if he got mistaken when I was fighting with Basilio. I wouldn't mind that. But he didn't. But that was fine. But he fought on that card too.
You also fought the last boxing show at Fenway Park. Matter of fact, you headlined the last 2 boxing shows at Fenway Park.
Absolutely. I fought George Arujo there.
Yeah.
George Arujo was a great fighter. New England champion for many years. Fought for the championship.
Yeah.
Barely lost with Jimmy Carter, I believe. He fought.
That's right.
Yep.
Jimmy Carter beat him.
Now you,
Who else is fighting the guy?
Vince Martinez.
And then Vince Martinez.
Now the two of you
Yes.
fought. You two of you fought, but you fought Vince too, didn't you, Joe?
No, another Martinez.
Oh, it was another one.
And then Vince Martinez is he's the coming guy. He was a pretty boy boxer.
That was in Fenway Park, though. You fought.
Fenway Park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they figured he definitely going to be champion of the world.
Mm-hmm.
I See, but I had something to say about that, you know.
Yeah.
And I fought him in Fenway Park, and
Yeah.
it was a great fight. It's a good fight. But I beat him. I beat him unanimously.
You won it. Yeah.
Not unanimously.
I was there.
Oh, fought him like that. And so, anyways, those are good times with me. But Joe and I go way back, and
Yes.
10 years like
he's
Sean.
never
Yeah. Wow.
he's never forgotten me, and I could never forget him. Because what he did for me was unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know, and I had some bad things that happened to me, but he made up for it, and to an extent, and he made my life
I want to get him back to Boston.
happy life.
I got you.
Remember?
I was in Arizona
He was Arizona.
I was there for 20 years. 20 years.
Sweet.
Going in Asthma. We went there because of my son, and then it was time to come back. My son died. It was time to come back, and I needed a job. I needed a job, and I had no one to go to tell you the truth. As popular as I was, I say this regretfully, as popular as I was, I don't know who to go to. But there was one kid that came up from Newton. His name was Joe, and he liked me, and he idolized me,
I loved
and I idolized him. And I said, I know who I'm going to call. He's not only a champ in his own right, he is a contender for the middleweight championship of the world.
Yeah.
And now he happens to be a representative. And I says, I'm going to give him a call. And I called my pal Joe, and I said, Joe, I said, listen, I've been here for 20 years.
Gotta come back.
You know, Arizona's been nice, but I got to get back. I said, my son's gone.
Yeah.
I got to get back. And I said, what could you do for me? He said, what could I do for you? I'm going to do it right now. Right this minute. I said, but times are tough. I know they're tough. You know? And it was. In that year, 1983, things were tough in Boston.
Yeah.
Politically. And
Wow.
he did, and Joe, you know, what could I
It was the Speaker of the House,
What could I, Tom McGee.
Tom McGee. I went to Tommy McGee and I said,
But he
you know,
was, you know, he's a,
get him on the phone. Honest to God.
so, I mean, you know, I was not bad for a court officer. I can handle myself fairly well.
You had a good left hook.
You know.
I want to point something out here, and you may or may not be aware of it because he would never take credit for it. Can we get this, Ariana? This was an affair, a tribute. It was Tony DeMarco was named Man of the Year by the Italian American Hall of Fame, and had a great event with a ton of people that turned out down at Lombardo's. As a matter of fact, Sal Lombardo said, "What time are you going to start?" I said, "About 6." He said, "Will you be out of there by about 9:15? We can clean up, pick up the ad books." This is the ad book. Well, 11:45, they had to kick us all out. And the place was still going strong. It was a great, it turned into like a whole weekend thing. And it was all because of Joe DeNucci. If Joe does, I went to Joe and I asked him about it. He said, "Yeah, absolutely." And I'm gonna try and find. Here it is right here. There were 3 co-chairmen of the event: Rico Petroselli, Gino Capoletti, and right down here in bold, the guy that put it all together, Joe DeNucci. So,
The auditor, Joe DeNucci.
okay, the auditor Joe DeNucci. I still call him the uncrowned chef.
Well, he is that too. But, that's it. And speaking of pictures, if I may, I got a picture over here that I just had to take over because it was so convenient and Joe was there, and you might remember this. I know you will remember this actually. And it's a picture of me in my 50th anniversary of my championship, and Dottie McGarry, who happens to be my wife, and she put it on with yours truly, right? Anyway, this picture here was with Joe DeNucci and Vinny Pazienza, right next to Joe.
Vinny was at the event.
Joey
yeah.
Vinny Pazienza, right next to Joe.
Yeah.
They're squaring off, so to speak.
Oh my
And
God.
I was with this fella here who was a great boxing promoter from Providence.
It was,
Jimmy Birchfield.
Jimmy Birchfield.
Yeah. Yes.
Jimmy Birchfield's there.
That was him.
And so that's a great picture. And I couldn't resist
That's
taking
nice.
the picture.
That's nice. That's great.
So, but I got more pictures of Joe because of our association with the Valentis and association
Yep.
with other, Sammy Fuller, who, by the way, is a great fighter.
I brought his name up earlier about being a great trainer and
Did he ever win the championship featherweight? No,
He never won a championship.
Yeah, he was one of the best fighters in the world.
the best.
Yeah.
But
I was at his house one time when Johnny Gagliardi was still fighting, and Sammy was training him, and I saw all trophies and pictures and everything. I said, "Wow!" I felt like I was in the boxing sports museum. You know,
Hey, Johnny Gagliardi was a good boxer. He was a good boxer. He
He
never
was.
had a. He didn't
know,
keep going.
You know what he did for me once? He was always in the fight game,
Yeah.
As a young fella, I needed someone to box with.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall who I was boxing, but I had no one to spar with, So one day, it comes in, went to the gym, and there was no one. The second day, no. And third day, there was nobody. For some reason, my sparring partners weren't making it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one guy I was boxing with pretty steadily, a couple of rounds, but he wasn't able to box with me that day. So I said, Jesus, I gotta get myself in shape.
He was Johnny Gagliardi.
And there's nothing like boxing when you're training. You can run.
Yeah.
Running is good. Running is very good for your lungs. You win. But and after all, and then hitting the bag is good. And speed bag is good, and skip rope is good, and calisthenics is good, but there's nothing
You
like
gotta box.
sparring. There's nothing like sparring.
Yeah.
And Johnny Gag says to me, "You need a spar? I'll go. I'll box with you." He said, "Sweet, you're like this. You haven't trained. I don't care." He took his clothes off, put his trunks on, and we started sparring. And I remember that. I remember that he boxed. He got me in shape one of my fights. So my sparring partners finally, we got a hold of some sparring partners.
Yeah.
Irvin Steen. Remember Irvin Steen?
Yeah.
The fellow from, his name is Irvin Steen. He's a black man from New York. And he was a great guy. He'd come to my sparring, my training camps. And my father likes him. And he'd come to my house many times and stay with us and eat with us. And he came in. Anyways, we finally got enough sparring partners. But just speaking of Johnny Gag, I know Joe DeNucci's very close to Johnny Gag.
Yeah.
Gagliano.
He was a dear friend.
He's a dear friend, right?
He is.
So, but I wanted to bring that up because Johnny Gag did spar on me for those
He
days.
told me the story of it too, and not at that time, but one time we got to talking, and one of the guys said, "John, what's the hardest you ever been hit?" Because somebody brought up the fact that he was trying to defend somebody in a street fight, and the guy hit him in the jaw with a baseball bat. And John turned around and he clubbed him, and then he had to go to the doctors because his jaw got broken. And so the subject come up, who's the hardest punch you ever took? He says, Tony DeMarco's left hook.
Really?
He said, we were sparring. Yeah, he said, we were sparring, and I could see Tony started, throwing a jab to the ribs. He said, I just put my elbow down to catch it. He said, the jab come up, and he said, it hit me right in the chops.
I changed my tune, huh?
But anyhow, that's high praise, from Johnny saying the hardest punch he ever took was from you.
Well, well, anyway, Joe's part of all of them also. He's part of all of them.
Yeah.
Even Joe Barboza.
Oh, my God. He sparred with Joe Barboza, too.
Yeah,
Wow, something, I never even realized that he was a boxer.
Yeah, he's
But,
a tough guy.
yeah. But You know, Joe, one of the things I remember, I meant to bring it up earlier, at least 2 different times, you would always bring kids up to the New Garden gym.
Right.
And eventually you'd get in and you'd spar with Paulie Stivaleta.
Oh, Paulie, yeah.
And, oh, my God, it looked almost like a real fight. And the kids, and then all of a sudden, you'd come across, hit him a shot, and Paulie would go down, you know?
No,
and
it was kids, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was
Yeah.
a kidding thing.
The kids,
and
yeah.
the kids used to go wild. And I thought that was so great. But
Paulie could punch. He was a good
my God.
banger. Remember Paulie still alive?
Sure, I remember Paul.
Yeah, he was a good guy.
Paulie
Dear friend of mine.
Stivaleta,
Dear friend, I know that.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I know mostly about him.
Yeah.
Sometime I would love to have,
Right.
I would love to have like a round table thing or something. Do a show with a lot of the guys that were on the scene at that time. You know, boxing. I'm thinking of guys like Johnny Mastrangelo, Mike Pusateri,
But, you know,
Vinnie Marino. I think was around that time.
yeah. You know something? Boxing is not what it used to be. It was unbelievable.
Absolutely, yeah, I
Monday night they'd have
Yep.
Philly cigars. Wednesday they'd have Pabst Blue Ribbon. Friday they would have Gillette Blue Blaze, the
Yep.
sharpest razors ever
Yep.
honed. And
To look sharp.
now, you know,
Yep.
now you don't. I don't know. I never saw a
All
fight.
you
for
do is pay your
20 years ago.
$75 and you watch a fight on pay TV
But, you know,
that may last 30 seconds.
But I mean, it's not what it used to be.
Well, it's an exceptional fights are on, but you have to pay for it. But there are very few exceptional fights.
Yeah.
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 You know, I'm remembering the influence that television has had on boxing. And I'm remembering back, and why I can't remember this guy's name, but you'll know it as soon as I mention the circumstances. Kid Gavilan was knocking everybody out. This young Chuck Davey.
Chuck Davey, yeah. Yeah.
Good-looking kid, a southpaw, a college kid, handsome white kid. Television wanted to put the two of them together.
Who's the one
And
in the garden?
who,
One of
did
those.
you fight Gavilan, Tony?
I fought
You
Gavin.
fought
I
Gavilan in
fought
the garden. You beat him.
Sure.
Yeah.
Gavin was one of the
Yeah.
great fighters, great
But-
champions.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
Hawk.
One of the great champions.
But this particular fight, television
And he
built
had
it
the
up.
bolo punch, you know.
Yeah.
And I was,
Yeah.
I concentrate on every time he attempt to
Yeah.
throw the bolo punch. I come with my left hook
Yeah.
and I caught him and then he stopped throwing those bolo punches and he did whatever he could outside of that. But I beat him a unanimous 10-round decision.
Right.
I remember so well, and this is probably the very first big production that television put on with boxing. For a solid month, Chuck Davey, got to get him in there with Kid Gavilan. The fight's coming. Finally, we get in. Gavilan ended his career. You remember, Gavilan murdered this kid. This kid was,
Yeah.
plus on top of being a southpaw, But because he was a good-looking white kid, this made a perfect match.
Yeah.
For television.
And he was a good fighter.
But,
he had his own. He
yeah.
fought them all. Fought a lot of television fights.
Yeah.
Very well known in television.
Billy Graham, remember the Billy Graham
Billy
fight?
Graham, my God, yes.
Billy Graham was around the 14th round or so. Billy Graham had the fight won, going away, and I guess he decided that he was going to try and knock out Gavilan, and he woke up an hour later, and that was that. Reminds me of the Jake LaMotta fight with Laurent Dortiel. Remember that was at the 15th round, I think it was.
Yeah.
Was that Dortiel or Villamain? Dortiel, was it?
I'm pretty certain
I
it was
remember
Dortiel.
I can't remember either one. It'll come to me if I think about it. But I recall that fight because Jake LaMotta, who, by the way, happens to be one of my favorites.
Oh, yeah.
Always mine, yeah.
Yeah, he was. When I was a kid, I was Liotta, and he was LaMotta.
Yeah.
And hell, that's close enough for me,
Yeah.
And but I remember when he fought
It was something.
Dortiel or Villamain, one of those guys, one of those great middleweights, and I think he was losing the fight.
Oh, yeah, he was getting murdered.
And then he established him in a corner. He finally got him in the corner, and he barraged him like you never saw a barrage in your life. He must have barraged him 80 times, 80 punches, in seconds. That's how it seemed to me.
Yeah.
And he finally, like a movie theater, the guy, the Villain Dantil, whoever there was, he went down, kept gradually going down, a little at a time, before they took him off the case because he knocked him out.
Yeah. Jake says that he said I was just lazy, I guess, since before I knew if the kid's winning the fight. And then in the 15th round, when he saw that the kid was going to try to knock him out, Jake says, I suck at him. He said, Jake made it look like he was getting knocked out, and they unloaded. And he killed him in about 10 fights, 10 punches.
He was somebody, wasn't he?
Jake was something.
He was something.
He was a guy. He was something.
He was.
He fought anybody, you know. I mean, he went overboard when he fought light heavyweight.
Yeah, but he used to come over.
Nadico, remember Nadico?
Danny Nadico, sure.
I mean, come on, you know.
Yeah.
You're good, but sometimes people, you know.
He used to come here after he was a fighter. He just.
Well, not only was he
I
a
mean,
fighter,
you know.
he come in after. He was in showbiz.
He was a comedian.
He was in showbiz.
Yeah.
I've seen him.
I got to tell you the story. About 13, 14 years ago, the Petronelli brothers backed a fight with Bash Ali for one of the alphabet title fights there. It was out in Lowell. So the last 3 days, they brought in Jake, and I was doing the publicity for it, and so I had to bring Jake around to appearances. So we got very, very friendly. And, you know, I did him a couple of special favors, and, you know, he says, I ain't going to forget you, kid. He says, and then he started telling me different stories about stuff, you know, but
that was him.
I said, how did you like the picture? He says, this kid was great, you know, and then when I saw it on the screen, he said, I wanted to rip his lungs out. He says, I wasn't that bad. So I called Vicky, I called Joey. He said, was I that bad? He said, no, Jake, you were 20 times worse. And so anyhow, he went to see the priest. And the priest took me, he says, the priest took me to a therapist, not a psychiatrist. I don't like that word. Therapist. He says, okay, Jake. He said, and the guy says, why don't you learn? If you can't behave normal, learn. You know, act normal. He says, how do I act normal? He said, he winds up going out with Rocky Graziano to Hollywood. Rocky got him into an acting school, and they said, write out some stories. Jake said he had something like 28 stories. He had them all numbered. And whenever he started feeling the rage, he'd take a breath, smile, touch the person, and say, let me tell you this story. And he would pick up, or if he left off with 17, he would go back and he'd get to 18. Now, when I had him on the Eddie Engelman show, he said, every now and then I make a mistake. If I start to tell the same story, you give me the high sign. Don't make me look stupid. I'll get mad. And so, and we did, and he never messed up at all. But Eddie Engelman, when he touched that, he said, let me tell you the story. Eddie said, in a minute, Jake. Jake growled. Eddie never said another word. Even when he had to do a commercial, he says, Jake, is it okay if I did? And Jake says, okay. But he was a trip and a half.
It was.
I had him on one of my shows, and I'll end with this. I didn't mean to get this long-winded about it. But that nobody could get him to do telephone interviews, but he would for me. And he says, I'm going to try out one of my jokes in his act. And so he says, you know, he says, I come home one day, I come home early. My wife didn't expect me. We're up in the bedroom, and she's totally naked. And I said, honey, Vicky, please, baby, I got you all these clothes. He went to the closet. He says, why don't you wear this nice blue dress, or this nice green dress, or this nice yellow dress, or, hi, Rocky, or this nice... So anyhow, let me go back to the Joe DeNucci, Tony DeMarco story. But anyhow, that was Jake, and you guys know Jake very well. But
You know what amazes me, just to conclude with Jake, what amazes me about Jake is that he was able to communicate as a comedian for over an hour and a half without stopping. Without repeating, I should say. Without repeating. That's just amazing. And if I could do that, I would be in showbiz myself.
His memory. He said it took him 2 years to remember all the things, and he had everything
He
in
did
order.
it very well, let me tell you.
Absolutely.
I've seen him in surf barroom with a couple times.
Yep. Yep.
And different other places in Las Vegas and all that.
Tony, your book, you got a book that's coming out.
Yes.
And we got to talk Joe into doing a book. I was telling him,
Absolutely.
Joe's got a story and a half.
I believe that.
But your book, you remember I said
I remember
you should
when
make
he's
a movie?
Yeah,
Yeah, I said, Joe, you should, Tony, remember I said you should make a movie and get Ray Liotta to play the part? There's a perfect connection. He
He's
said,
too
Ray
beautiful.
Liotta. He
He's
said,
too
Ray
beautiful
Liotta.
to play for me. Play me. He's too good looking. Let's get
Wait a minute.
someone else.
Time out. I wrote a story about you years ago, and I said, movie star, good looks, and here's the picture. And well, I got so many pictures in here, but that's one of them.
man, you.
And look like John Garfield.
John. Well, yes, but you know.
I just got the high sign. We only got 2 minutes.
He doesn't want. He's not around anymore.
Yeah, well,
He won't do
I
it.
know. I know.
Well, this has been a great night.
Remember I told you we could do another hour?
This is great,
I
Tony.
told you we could
And
do another
you
hour.
really come by, and it makes me.
I was delighted.
Oh, you're delighted. You make me delighted. Believe me.
Tony went way out of his way to do all this, and of course,
God bless you.
Ariana made
Thank you,
all
Ari-
the time, get everything
Ariana.
coming just right, and Dan Sound, the station manager, they did everything. Just
Before
right.
you leave, I hope you say a little Dottie because you know.
Yeah, of course.
You know,
We're all going out to
Absolutely.
dinner.
we celebrated our anniversary the other day.
That's right.
Yeah.
Happy
I gotta
anniversary.
go.
1 year.
We're gonna go out, right?
Wow. Oh yeah. But can we all get together again sometime soon?
Whenever.
Absolutely.
You know,
delighted.
this would be great. And maybe, are you in touch with those guys? Like I mentioned, Johnny Mastrangelo, he's got the restaurant, Vinny Marino.
Whatever you
I
want.
know Mike Pusateri and stuff.
Whatever you want to do.
That would make a great TV show or anything. Even do it for charity, for God's sakes.
You should put a ring over here. We
There you go. The sports museum.
after 7 of these fights.
How much time do we have, Ariana? Oh, I got to wrap it up. Well, I can't tell you. Remember I told you, Joe, this will go real quick. It's the quickest hour that I've ever had. And I want to thank my guest, Joe DeNucci, and my special guest, Tony DeMarco. And thank you all for watching. I hope we'll see you guys soon. My name is Jim Tuberosa, and the name of the show is Real Grass, Real Heroes, a look at the golden age of sports in Boston.